Hello guys, today we'll have a junior Laravel API code review and a special one. We will talk about topics like how to not overcomplicate common responses, API responses with traits like this one, how to not overload your controllers with try-catch with a lot of exceptions, and how to handle those exceptions globally somewhere else, and also how to introduce PHP enums to avoid writing letters like this and then writing comments down below explaining what those letters actually mean. And this code review will be special, different from others, because usually on this channel when I'm doing code review, I just give suggestions, point the places in the code that I would change. But in this case, I went all the way deeper into actually implementing the changes and putting it out on GitHub in form of actual commits. And then I decided to comment those commits, why I made those changes. I thought it would be just one tutorial, but it became such a long article that I released it as a course on Laravel Daily. So there's a new course, 1 hour long read, 15 lessons with various tips and changes of that API. And by the way, at the end of this video, I will tell you how to get that course cheaper because we launched some discounts on Laravel Daily. So in this video, I will focus on 3 topics that I mentioned above, but in the course you will find many more tips and the access to actual repository where you can follow along with all the commits. Now let's go to the actual tips in this video. The main problem in this repository is in general that it's written not in a Laravel way. It's a Laravel API project, but it feels like it was written by someone trying to implement Laravel API coming from outside of Laravel world. Someone from different framework or even different programming language implemented Laravel API kind of successfully, but in many places not utilizing the framework features or not utilizing them fully. Like for example, using API resource, but then overriding the update for specific logic. But now let's focus on the topics that I mentioned above, for example, traits for common API responses. So in the main controller of this project, order controller, you may see a lot of methods like this not found, this not authorized, this DB error and stuff like that. Those come from a 2-level structure. So that order controller extends API controller, which is kind of like a base controller for the whole project, which has a few extra methods like isAble, auth is owner, and these, which in turn call another method called error. And that error comes from a trait, which is used inside of that API controller. So there's a separate trait API responses with 3 methods, OK, success, and error. So in my opinion, it's overcomplicated structure. And throughout that full course, I'm trying to refactor that to actually eliminate that trait. In one of the final lessons, we actually delete that trait altogether. But first we start from comparing, for example, these 2 methods. And as it turns out, OK is just the shortcut to success method with the default parameters. So this one can be eliminated almost blindly, and everywhere it is used, we can change that to this success. But then in general, if you want to unify the API response throughout all your API endpoints, where would you do that? And actually, I agree with the approach that they can be base controller like API controller with some methods like these. But what I don't agree with is another layer of trait. And I've seen people using trait for the same behavior, but trait is then used in the actual controller. So there's no base controller then. In this case, it's not only 2 layers of controller and trait, but also those are kind of repeating. They're all pointing at this error with just different default message and different status code, sometimes not even different one. So what I ended up doing is actually 2 things. First thing, I utilized API resources to return the format from them, which is default Laravel behavior for eloquent API resources. So there's order collection returned, order resource returned, and those contain the data wrapper, which is kind of the default response for Laravel API. So we don't need any like this success or this response success methods for that. We just utilize the framework. And then for error messages, instead of all those this error, this DB error and stuff like that, I just decided to catch all those exceptions separately globally, no matter where they come from. So for example, here in the controller, in one of the final versions of that controller, you don't see try catches anymore. And then we don't need to call those methods like this unauthorized or something like that. So this is where we get to my second point, how to avoid those try catches. They are not here anymore in the controller, so where are they? Since Laravel 11, you can define the behavior for all exceptions in Bootstrap app file with exceptions, and then you list what should happen with each type of exceptions. And here I specified all the errors which used to be in that trait with not authorized, response not authorized, or not found, or access denied, also query exception, and then the final frontier is if not validation exception, which means basically anything else that could happen, then it replaced unexpected error trait method. So this is how you can unify the response for all errors for your API as exceptions. And then the final thing I wanted to show you in this video is enums. This is not related to API specifically, but in the factory I saw this. 3 letters with the comment at the bottom for order status, which letter means which status. But the problem is if those letters are used elsewhere, then what? You need to repeat that comment in all the files to explain that to everyone who would open that different file. And this is the example. In one of the validation rules form request, we see this status in those 3 letters exactly. So if someone opens that form request and sees this, they wouldn't know which letter means which status. And also in the automated tests, when order is created, I saw this, status P, hard-coded, and developers would have no idea what P stands for. And of course, one of the solutions is to create database table order statuses with full names and then foreign key. But if in the database you want to stay with just one letter, you may do that. It's kind of fine, debatable, but okay-ish from database structure point of view, but in the code it still needs to be clear. So for that, and also for unifying and to avoid errors, we can introduce enums. So this is the enum class representing the same 3 letters but with constants with human words. And then what happens? In the order factory we can generate random element from cases of that enum, and then developers can click and see what's inside. So you don't need to write any comments. Then in the form request you can use rule enum, again referencing the values from that enum. And in the test case or wherever you need a specific value, you can reference it like this, and then for everyone who is reading that code in the future, it's crystal clear. And also enums, as I said, provide additional validation, so someone would not mistype a different letter which is not in the values of enum. If you want to continue the journey through this repository and see how I refactored, for example, gates in the API controller to remove this isAble method, which is again another unnecessary layer on top of the default behavior of the framework, or how I wrote tests along the way or fixed the existing tests. Again, you will find it in the course on Laravel Daily, as well as links to specific commits related to specific lessons from that repository. And as I promised in the beginning, information about discounts. So we recently implemented on Laravel Daily a thing called purchasing power parity, which is pricing based on country. We had that already in the form of coupons and discount codes, but now if you visit pricing or billing, it would automatically detect your country. For example, I'm from Lithuania, and it would automatically apply the discounts according to the region. So you can visit this page of pricing, I will link that in the description below, and see your price for the membership, which allows you to get this course cheaper. And what do you think about those ideas about API responses, try-catch, exception handling? Let's discuss in the comments below. That's it for this time, and see you guys in other videos.